Maybe it's thinking. How is everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to Boys in the Zone. I'm your host, EJ Savage, and this podcast is brought to you by the Grid Network. Haven't been on, I think, in 2 weeks. Just not a lot of news to talk about, and I just didn't feel like doing it. I was sick one week, and the next week I wasn't fully back. So, 2 week hiatus, but I am back, and I've got a good guest here, Lord Dylly. He's been on the show once prior to now. He's starting to do some Twitter Spaces, which would be interesting if you guys checked it out as well. And that is with the Cowboys storyline and a group of their followers that start that space and just talk Cowboys. So it's a fun thing. So make sure you check that out. But also, Lord Dylly does have a YouTube page. It is right under on the screen right there. YouTube at / Lord Dylly. And without further ado, man, how are you doing tonight?
Great, dude. How you been? It's been a while.
It has. Getting over the sickness, but I'm excited to kind of get into this training camp mood for the Cowboys, see what they're all about, and hopefully get some contracts done. I think that's the biggest thing that's concerning or just frustrating as a fan is Dak, CD, and Micah to an extent have not got contract extensions. Which one of those guys do you think gets done first? Or do you feel like one of those players could possibly, this be their last season with the Cowboys? What are you feeling right now?
Yeah, if you asked me that question at the end of the season, I would have said Dak because that would have allowed them to participate in free agency, right? We're so far past that now. I mean, we're almost in a training camp. You got Justin
Hmm.
Jefferson signed his deal. There's nothing holding back Ceedee Lamb at this point from taking a deal. We don't know who's holding it up. Is it the front office? Is it the agent at this point? I don't know what could possibly be holding it up. He's clearly going to be 32 to 34 million roughly a year. I don't know what the structure is going to look like, and I always argue the total structure, the way the cap hits work, the guarantees, all that is more important than the average per year, anyways. So I don't know if there's contract details holding that up, but I think CD is going to get done first, maybe after a slight holdout in training camp. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure he will hold out if he needs
Hmm.
to, and I don't blame him at all for doing that. He should do that. He deserves to do that. He deserves his money. So I think he'll get done first. Dak I think Dak probably gets done, but now there's some hesitation because it's taken so long. And I really thought he would have gotten done, like I said before, free agency. So now I don't know. And there's a whole thing I put out there on Twitter, a whole thread about is it worth it to sign these franchise quarterbacks or not? I think Dak's a great player. I love
Hmm.
Dak. I think he can win a Super Bowl. It's just the generality of franchise quarterbacks, just in general, and how much cap space they take. And the data shows they might not be as important as maybe you'd think. But that being said, I think Dak does get done. I think Dak probably should get done. And then Michael will get done next year, is my guess.
Yeah, it's a strange situation that we're in right now with the Dak contract because, like you mentioned, I mean, if they wanted to extend him and get the cap relief, they should have done that months ago. And so now you're really in the point of do we want to see what we have in trade lands, especially with preseason coming up and training camp and really getting into the grind with that stuff? And if we do see that we like Trey Lance and he looks good in our system because he finally has a full grasp of it, according to reports and Mike McCarthy himself, how does that dictate what Dak's contract, where it's heading? You know what I mean? So, because realistically, if you can, if you like Trey Lance enough, I don't think he's better than Dak, even if he's good in preseason, whatever. But if you like him enough, how do you see your team's future with Trey Lance? And do you think it's better going that route and trying to maybe, sign and trade? I know that you don't see that in the NFL as much, but happens in the NBA. You'll re-sign a player for another team and then just trade them to that team. And it's a strange situation because he's coming off of the MVP runner-up year and probably his best overall season of his career. Truthfully, I mean, obviously 2021 was really good as well. Um, but man, I'm hesitant to move off of a franchise quarterback And I want to hear more about that from your side and what you really think the front office is thinking and what you think we should do as a fan.
Yeah, so let me pull up the data here. Give me just a minute because I got a whole
I'll
chart. I
pull up some
spent
some comments here. Kyle F
man,
says, "What's up, guys? Jerry and Steven have a history of trying to get contracts done well at training camp. It'll probably be the case with Lamb and Prescott. So he's taking they are going to re-sign Prescott." Tacos and Touchdown says, "What's good, fellas?" Or "What's going on, fellas?" Sorry. And then my guy Vince P also says, "What's up, guys? Glad to have you guys in here chatting it up." What were you saying though, Dylan?
Yeah, so I went back basically 10 years, 9 years, back to 2015, looked at all the Super Bowls, all the quarterbacks that were in the Super Bowls. And this data is a little bit skewed because Mahomes is so dominant in the AFC. So it's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
pick data about quarterbacks in the AFC. But 7 out of the last 9 Super Bowls had a quarterback on a rookie deal. And the highest cap hit during that stretch, the last 9 years for a quarterback, was 17% twice. That was Mahomes in 23 and 22. And then Brady was like 13%. Everybody else was like 12% and lower. And some of these guys were less than 5% cap hit for that
Mm-hmm.
season. So, like, the data shows that, like, you're paying these guys, and you can pay these guys a lot of money and backload that money as far as the cap hit goes, put on void years. So that way you get a couple of years of relief before the money really starts to hit. But when it hits, I mean, the data is showing that it's basically over until that next relief period of that quarterback hit. And now I'm seeing whispers out there about the league possibly separating the quarterback contracts and their cap from the overall team cap. So that'll be interesting to see it because they are getting a bit out of control, right? You're talking a quarter of the cap to one player, no matter how important the position is. It's just insane. It's nuts, and you
Yeah.
can't operate that way. But you also can't have a franchise quarterback. So it's like, what are you supposed to do? You know?
Yeah, and you can't, and it's crazy because you can't let them walk in free agency and get nothing for them. And that's one thing that the NBA has implemented that's been kind of good is if you do leave, or sorry, if you stay with the hometown team that's drafted you, you can actually allocate more money than any other team can offer that same player. So it's like the super max deal or whatever they call it, which would be interesting if you can use that on one player and that being your quarterback that you drafted. That would be a good deal. And then a certain percentage of that, like you were kind of saying, um, gets put into a separate category that doesn't account into your cap. That would be an interesting thing to see. And I would be in favor of that, especially with how, I mean, I think like, what was Tony Romo making? Not even probably 20 mil just, and he was our last quarterback. And now we're talking 60 million a year. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and it just
just,
depends what the percentages are, right? Because I don't know what the
yeah,
cap percentages were when he was playing. Maybe it's equivalent. I don't think it is. I think these cap, it's just escalated to a
yeah.
point where it's 20, 25%, and it's not manageable.
Yeah, and I think I looked at a stat that was talking about the cap has went up like 100 million in just 10 years. And even more than that, I think it was.
COVID
So,
screwed it up big time because it was
um,
exploding, right? And then COVID came along, and then it
mhm.
slowed it down tremendously after a couple of years post COVID. So we're kind of at that point where it's beginning. And now on top of that, now you've got this DirecTV settlement too, which is insane. So now they got to pay all this money out as well. And I wonder what that's going to do as far as revenues and the cap growth.
Kyle brings up a point. He says, I don't believe they should re-sign Prescott, but I do think the front office fears QB hell. I think they should trust the strength of their organization and the ability to draft consistently well. I would pump the brakes on that a little bit. Yes, they are a good drafting team overall, but quarterback is not the position that they're good at drafting. You look at Romo, completely lucked into him as an undrafted free agent. Um, they didn't even want Prescott in that draft. They wanted Paxton Lynch and Cooks and whoever it was ahead of him, and eventually ended up with Prescott. So they lucked into that. They've taken some guys like McGee in the past. They've taken who was the other big one that we drafted? I'm missing one.
Danucci.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
Danucci.
he's not a huge draft pick, but it's still, yeah, Danucci we drafted. There's some guys that have come through here, and then they tried their own experiments, moving Jameel Showers from whatever position he was playing to quarterback, and then he eventually plays safety
Safety.
again
Yeah.
or whatever. So, yeah, it's one of those things. Yes, we're a good drafting team, but I don't think anybody has a formula of drafting good quarterbacks consistently other than maybe the Packers.
Yeah,
Um,
the Cowboys haven't had to really push the issue. I mean, they went from it's been, I mean, almost 20 years now where it's just been they've had quarterbacks back to back with Romo and Dak, and they didn't think Dak was going to be anything right away, and they
yeah.
just really lucked into that one. So yeah, that's interesting. And the part about fear, I think I look at the fear a different way, and it doesn't impact this organization because the owner is also the GM, but
Hmm.
other GMs around the league, you cut or trade or don't have a franchise quarterback, that's the quickest way to lose your job. So it doesn't really impact these guys, but around the
Yeah.
league, I think that's contributing to this explosion in these quarterback contracts.
Yeah. And I think that that's another thing that why there's so much talk circling around. Okay, the Cowboys are going to trade one of these players, being Micah or CD. Um, because when you think about it, a lot of GMs weigh, okay, am I even going to be able to use the assets that I get back in this draft haul before I get fired or before there's turnover, you know? But with Jerry Jones, there's not that fear. There's no, he knows he's going to be the GM. So maybe there is some, merit to that discussion. Now, I don't think that they're going to trade either of those players. Don't get me wrong, but there is a certain mindset that Jerry Jones goes into trade discussions or the draft, player acquisition, where most GMs don't have to go about with that same mindset of I could possibly lose my job. So, good point. I think there was some report that was talking about Ceedee Lamb wanting at least 32 million, or he's going to request a trade. I don't know the validity of that report. However, he's worth that. I mean, he's worth being, second, first, highest paid wide receiver, depending on what you feel. I think Justin Jefferson's better. He's been better whenever he's on the field. However, CD's top three for me for sure. So,
Hmm.
um, and especially with how that connection has really, pushed off that past year with Dak and Mike McCarthy's system. I think there is an argument for him being better than Justin Jefferson, especially with Sam Darnold probably being the QB1 in Minnesota. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with signing him up for 35 mil per year. It just needs to get done because at the end of the day, you do not have a deep wide receiver group in the building right now. Behind Brandon Cooks, it's a lot of unknowns and question marks, and you have to figure that position out. But also, it is so important to have a veteran in training camp teaching those guys. Now, Brandon Cooks is a great leader. He has shown that on and off the field, taking guys under his wing. But there's something different about learning from one of the best wide receivers in the league. Brandon Cooks isn't that anymore. CD is. So, especially for the young guys, it's very important to have him in there at training camp. Do you kind of feel the same? What's your ideas with that?
Yeah, real quick, let me touch on the contract part of this. Is between Micah and CD. As far as balancing the cap, they have to get one of those guys on a longer deal than like 4 years. In order to spread that cap hit out, they've got to get one of those guys to sign a longer than normal deal. Otherwise, they're going to have Dak, CD, and Micah. All of their cap hits are going to be hitting together at the same time. They can add those void years, but they've also got to roll over Dak's money as well, too. His cap hits that are
Mhm.
coming up, they got to roll all that over as well. So again, the structure is the important part here in figuring out how to balance when the cap hits come in. As far as the leadership goes, um, you know, and there's my boy Rob from Vegas. He's one of the guys on storyline calls and all the time. That's my dude right there.
There we go. What's up,
Um,
Rob?
but I think that leadership is one of the things this team is sorely lacking. I know Rob thinks that as well. And I don't know if CD is necessarily that leader yet. We saw he shut down in that Green Bay game. He was done
Yeah.
after the first drive. He got hit in the back at one point by one of the Green Bay corners and just kind of took it and just walked away. We don't really have any leaders on defense outside of DeMarcus Lawrence. I don't think this team outside of Dak really has anybody that's like a vocal stand-up guy like that. And even in the receiver room, I think that's lacking. And it's a packed room, but I don't think even with CD there, I don't think any of these guys are really that guy to be a bona fide leader in that group.
Well, I think that Jake Ferguson has the making of
Mm.
that. I
Yes,
really
yes,
do
you're right.
think that he has that. I think Eric Kendricks just having the familiarity with Mike Zimmer's defense. He's going to come in and be a very veteran leader in that linebacker core, which is important. I also think that you have some leadership with with Malik Hooker. Now he didn't come off as being a leader when he went on to the podcast and was talking about the Micah stuff. But I think that he understands that sometimes those things do need to be called out. Now, apparently they're talking about it or whatever, but I do think that Malik actually wants to be the leader. But whenever Ron Kurtz was there, it wasn't always, he didn't feel like he had the voice in the room. I think we're going to see a new Malik Hooker this year as far as being a leader on the back end more. And I'm actually really excited for him in the back end with Mike Zimmer's defense and just not always bringing, because Dan Quinn would almost always bring down the strong safety into the box and kind of leave Malik up there to play, roam safety all the time by himself. And I think that hurt him a little bit. So disguising some more things, I think Malik's going to be a lot better. And I'm actually excited about that. But I will say to your point about Ceedee being the leader, yeah, I think that less about him talking to younger players and more about just showing them how to do it. This is how I get off on this release. This is how I run this route. This is, if the cornerback is pushing me towards the sideline, this is how I come back and gain that leverage and allow my quarterback a lane to throw this on this go ball, etc. Just stuff like that. And especially young guys, not always are leaders the most outspoken people. So as a young guy, it's also your job to come in and ask questions too. So
No doubt.
just him being there and you being like, hey, CD, how do you run this? Or how do you do this? I mean, I don't think he doesn't come off like a prima donna where you'll find out. Like he'll explain it. And I think that he also knows the value of that because Amari Cooper, he has specifically said Amari has taught him a lot about the game. Even Brandon Cook's coming in and showing him how to run certain routes one way or the other. So I think he realizes the importance of that as well. I just don't think he's very outspoken, and he definitely gets into his feelings, and he wears his heart on his sleeve a little bit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Jumping over. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Real quick, on the leadership front, you're right. There's two different kind of categories of leaders. There's the kind of tutorship kind of guy, the mentor kind of guy, like I think you're talking about with CD. And then there's the vocal leader on game day, get in your face, make sure you're doing your job right. That's like a DeMarcus Lawrence. How do you feel about putting pressure on these guys to try and be leaders when necessarily they don't have that natural talent, like for instance Micah Parsons?
I think this is my most exciting thing that I've heard thus far during the offseason is Mike Zimmer is going to be down on the sideline, which takes the onus off the players always having to be the leaders down there and puts it on the coach. And I think that that's a big thing that Dan Quinn's defense lacked, is it was always either and I think that the reason why the secondary was so locked in most of the games is because Al Harris was down there on the sideline talking to his guys,
For sure.
versus Dan Quinn up in the booth. And it's different when your head coach is talking to you about something like, yo, the front seven has to be completely in tune with the back four. And those things go a long way. So Mike Zimmer being down there, being a leader, Eric Kendricks as well. I think that he's going to be so good for Damone Clark, Overshown, these younger guys. And then, D-Law, he's one of those vocal leaders. I think that actually, for as much as Ron Kurtz talked, if you're going to be one of those leader guys that's always, chirping and talking and trying to hype up your guys, you don't want to be the reason why they're letting up big plays either, because you lose some of that credibility. And I think that Ron lost some credibility last year in that department. And so I'm excited to see what Malik does as a leader on that back end role. You're also getting Trayvon Diggs back. He's going to be not just showing up in crutches at home games. He's going to be there on the field talking to the younger guys. I'm also just excited about Zimmer because he's really a secondary specialist, and for that back end and just being down on the sideline, man, I think that that's the most important and most exciting thing from him being the DC. But yeah, I mean, more players that step up and want to actually put their money where their mouth is a good thing for this team. And I think
What do you think about Micah
guys,
in that regard?
it's hard for me, and I had Micah's brother on here and on my podcast, I think, a month
I
ago
love
or so.
Terrence, dude. That dude's awesome.
Um,
He's great.
yeah, he's great. But one thing I definitely see from talking to Terrence was Micah is definitely, cognizant about his his role on the team and how he is going to get that contract because he still is
Mm-hmm.
playing on a rookie contract. I
Yep.
mean, that doesn't, allow you to be good for life until you get that second contract. He knows that. And so I'm not going to knock the guy for looking out for himself. I just want to see him be willing to meet with Zimmer and say, "Hey, listen, I know that I want to rush the passer and stuff like that. However, it is if it's more advantageous for the team, even if it's at the detriment of myself, I will play some linebacker or I will do this or I'll do that." I think that would go a long way, not only with fans that have question marks circling him, and especially with his podcast and stuff like that. Say what you want. I don't really read into that stuff as much. However, when you get your tail whipped, don't go on the next day talking about, oh, it's good. We're going to get them next time. No, you guys have played that team twice before in the playoffs, lost back-to-back seasons to them in the playoffs. You can't go on after, what was it, a 35-7, something crazy like that loss. You cannot go on the next day and chuck it up to, oh, we just got to be better. Like that's not what we wanted to hear. So,
That's what you say week 7 when you lose. Yeah. Not when
yeah.
you lose the big game. I'm with you though. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think the podcast is typically that big of a deal. I understand. I always say the same thing you're saying right now about him wanting to play DN, getting the sacks. That's how you get the money. You get paid more as
Mhm.
a DN or edge rusher than you do as a linebacker. But he's an undersized guy. He said he's an undersized guy. He's not an undersized linebacker, especially if he's going to go play like Will or something like that. And he can flow sideline to sideline, help in the run game at that
Yeah.
point. And it's going to, I think, be beneficial for him, help him probably last longer into the season, maybe get more sacks that way. So I think he's got to take a more holistic approach to it. And then as far as the leadership goes, don't be a leader, Michael. Like, you're not born with it. You don't have that natural gift to be a leader. I don't want to force him to be a leader. I just want him to go be a dominant, heat-seeking missile type player.
Yeah.
If you want to be a leader at some point, if you grow into it, great, but don't force it. You know what I mean? Like, don't say you're going to be a leader and then not do the steps to be a leader, like show up at voluntary OTAs. I mean, that's a big part of being a leader, I think, is being with your
And
team. But
sometimes a leader isn't the vocal guy, okay? And that's fine. But when your team comes to you or your DC comes to you and says, "We need to play, dude. You're our best player. We need to play." And then you take that in and then you go out there and perform on the field. That can also be a semblance of a leader as well. Taking the onus of, okay, I'm the best player on this team, on this defense. I have to be that down in, down out, don't take plays off. And that's another way to be a leader. So yeah, as far
for sure.
as the
Yeah.
Micah stuff, man, it doesn't bother me. The podcast stuff, being the president of, whatever it was at Bleacher Report or whatever, that does not bother me. I completely advocate for players, finding different avenues because in reality, the NFL is not a given. You can get injured like that and your career is over. So him having that podcast set up and where he can bring players on and talk and do stuff like that, that's great. It doesn't bother me, but it's the time and place kind of a thing. If you
Mm-hmm.
get your tail whooped that bad, don't come on and give us excuses. Don't I would just not even come on, like how he dodged Skip Bayless and Shannon
Mm-hmm.
Sharp, I believe it was his rookie
Yep.
year. That's what I want to see personally. But anyways, moving on to more of the NFC East talk, and I mean, there's the other teams have been gearing up realistically compared to the Cowboys. The Commanders have signed a lot of former Cowboys, including Dorrance Armstrong, Dan Quinn, obviously as their new head coach, Tyler Biotish, Fowler Jr. There's probably other players I'm missing in there. The Eagles have went and got C.J. Gardner-Johnson for their back end that much needed him last year. They got Vic Fangio, a better DC that they have last year. I would say Kellen Moore is a better offensive coordinator than Brian Johnson was last year, even though I don't think that Kellen Moore is a great OC. but that team has made moves, and then the Giants went and had a really solid draft, getting Malik Neighbors and also trading for Brian Burns. So, and they got another one of my kind of pet cats and Tyler Nubin on the back end as a safety out of Minnesota. So they're gearing up. All of these teams are going to be better, in my opinion. And the Cowboys realistically stayed the same to me or got
Hmm.
a little bit worse. And so, how do you feel? And relative to the division opponents. Now, I don't think that the Giants or the Commanders bridge the gap to really compete with the top two dogs in the division, but they have got better, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
where do you start within this division? How do you think that this is going to go?
I think that adding a bunch of players is a step in the right direction. But when you're as bad as the Commanders have been, when you're as bad, especially the Giants as they have been, it's going to take more than an offseason of new acquisitions to really take the next step.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see Neighbors and Diggs. They're already talking all that trash. It's like, sit down, young guy. You're a rookie. You haven't done anything yet. But, anyways, the Eagles, I think it's going to be obviously between the Cowboys and the Eagles. Cowboys, when you compare the rosters, I mean, I think they're still neck and neck. The Cowboys, they lost a bunch of kind of role guys, and then they lost obviously Tyron Smith and Tony Pollard. Pollard is
Hmm.
kind of, maybe good, maybe not good. We still don't really know. I don't think he got that great of a shake here, a fair shake in Dallas, the way they used him, how poor the
Definitely.
offensive line played in the middle. So we'll see what he does out in Tennessee. Um, but as far as, maybe the Eagles go, Jalen Hurts took a step back last year. And, I've studied like 4 or 5 games now on Jalen Hurts. I went back, watched the all 22 on this guy, and it's the same stuff he's been doing since his rookie year, and his time to throw numbers show it, where this guy locks onto his first read in the pocket and he stares at him for like 3 seconds and he doesn't move to the next guy. And what that tells me is this guy's not pre-snap identifying where he should be going with the football appropriately or properly. And
Yeah.
I see these Eagles guys, these Eagles fans are telling me, well, it was a scheme from last year. It was long developing routes, so it could be. I don't know. It definitely could be part of that reason, right?
And then
But
they're excited about Kellen Moore. That's funny.
well,
Okay, go
right.
ahead.
So you're either going to get 4 hitches in a slant, from Kellen Moore, or you're going to
Yep.
get 4 verticals from Kellen
A
Moore.
lot of, yeah, a
It's
lot
one or
of
the
three
other.
by one sets with at least a hitch and a curl in there, or yeah, something
Yeah. So,
shallow,
but
one shallow cross, something. Yeah.
he's going to have Hurts throwing the ball 40 plus times a game in that offense, and I think that's a recipe for disaster. Hurts
Mm,
is a 30 throw a game guy, and after that, you get diminishing returns. He led the league in interceptions last year. It was definitely a step back. And everybody wanted to crown him kind of champion of the NFL, top 5 quarterback after that Super Bowl run, which he was great during that season. He played
yeah.
really great in that Super Bowl. But just like I said with Mahomes when he did it for the first time, I said, let me see it another year and see where it goes. And Hurts took a big step back after that season. So I don't know what to think about the Eagles. So I guess we'll see. I know what I got with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. I don't know what I have with Hurts just yet.
We will see what happens, but is there's a interesting thing that I read about the Eagles having an MVP candidate quarterback, them getting reaching the Super Bowl, then their offensive coordinator leaves and gets hired on as the Colts head coach, which is the exact same thing that happened with Wentz and Hurts, and then the year after that, the quarterback fell off, and then one more year after that, I think that they're gone from the team, released. So it's going to be
Hmm.
interesting to see
Hmm.
if history repeats itself there. Um, yeah,
What's
with
interesting about Hurts too, real quick while we're on the topic, his contract sucks, dude. If he continues to regress, that's going to absolutely blow up their salary cap. And I won't get into the details of it because it's boring and it's confusing as hell how they structured it. But the reason they have
Mhm.
so much cap room is because they plan on extending him when that contract expires. And if they don't, it's over $100 million in dead cap instantly and several more seasons of a high amount of dead cap as well after that. So we'll
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, though the Eagles are, they're not as bad as the Saints as far as kicking it down the road, but they're one of those teams that definitely do that a lot. And the Cowboys this season as the kind of get right season for the Cowboys, because next
Hmm.
season they actually are, I think, top 10 in cap
Hmm.
space in the entire league. So it's going to be interesting to see the difference between those two teams as far as that goes. But
Yep.
yeah, Kellen Moore, I'm not really worried about him as the OC. I think I'm more worried about this Vic Fangio hire because he has been good against Prescott. One of the main reasons why he has been good is just because he doesn't give any tells pre-snap, and that's one of the biggest strengths for Dak Prescott. I think that's probably his biggest strength, realistically, is just pre-snap, diagnosing the defense and trying to figure out, okay, this is my hot for this specific look, and I know exactly where to go with the ball. If it's not there, then I got this one and this one. Um, and so that's why he's had some hiccups against Vic Fangio defenses. Now he wasn't bad against the Dolphins last year, or yeah, last season, in that game. However, he wasn't great. And we'll see what happens with Dak against the Eagles. He's been very good against that team. Really, the past um, 3 seasons. Very good. But it's all dependent upon if the Eagles really fix their secondary or not. I know
Mm-hmm.
that they spent two high premium picks, their first and second rounder, on, I think who was it? Terrion Arnold and the
The
kid out of Iowa.
yeah,
Um,
Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean. So yeah, those two players, and then you add in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That could be a real difference maker. However, you are relying on rookies, and then Darius Slay is a year older. I don't even know if Bradbury's with the team. If he is, he's a year older. Ringo hasn't been good. Whoever else is there has not been good. So we'll see. It's a wait and see kind of a thing with that. But to the own right of me being worried about the Vic Fangio hire, I think the Eagles should be kind of worried about the Mike Zimmer hire. He's a guy that
Mm-hmm.
isn't afraid to walk linebackers up into that hole. Will walk both the linebackers up and then drop one, disguise stuff. He's also a guru with the secondary, and we also retained Al Harris, another year of Deron Bland, Diggs being coached up. We also have some young guys. I think that they signed the cornerback that was for the Raiders out of Ohio State. I can't remember his name. Um, uh, Gosh, yeah, it's escaping me. But we signed him. We also have some young guys, Eric Scott Jr., Kalen Carson, which we just drafted. So some good returns. And then we also got Lewis for the slot. I think that this secondary has the potential to be as good, if not better, honestly, than last year. And that's projected upon Diggs coming back at the same, level. If the ACL is kind of a hindrance to him, maybe not. But I'm excited about the Zimmer hire, truthfully.
Yeah, and on the cornerback topic, I was looking at the roster and I don't have it pulled up now, so I couldn't tell you all the names. But after CB3, it's really interesting because there's going to be a battle. I think Jordan Lewis is gone next year. This is his last year. They've got him on a 1 year
Mhm.
cheap deal. It's like $2.5 million. After this year, he'll be gone. So it's going to be interesting to see which player behind CB3 steps up. And there's a lot of them and a lot of good names after that point. So, and a lot of
Yeah.
young guys. So it'll be really interesting to see. And then as far as the Zimmer stuff goes, um, I'm excited to see linebackers use as linebackers, man. Like none of
Yes.
this little guy. Hopefully your DTs can take on blocks. I still think we're only going to go as far in defense as our DTs take us, at being Mozzie Smith, basically. That's really all we have there at this point, which is shocking to me still. Um,
You know, I it's weird because I think that the Cowboys saw the Armstrong's numbers were, pedestrian in the run game.
mm-hmm,
Um, Fowler was not good in the run game.
mm-hmm.
Um, who am I missing?
Osa,
Well, no, I'm talking
free
about
tech.
just D ends. There's one more D end. Sam Williams. He was hit and miss as well. And then Micah, who's not good in the run game. So I think with our second round selection this year, we've got two bookends that can run defend now with Lawrence and his name is escaping me, the second round
Nealon.
pick. Yeah, Marshawn Nealon.
Yep.
Both of those guys can run defend. Sam Williams should be getting better. He gets some tackle for losses here and there, but he's hit and miss. And hopefully Micah under this Zimmer system isn't just okay, get the quarterback, get the quarterback. He's more disciplined, and I hope that helps because when when your ends are um, stout in the run defense, it does help your defensive tackles and especially your linebackers because they don't have to worry about, oh, this running back can kick it outside because our ends are always QB hunting. They can really focus in the middle and just hit those holes. So
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
that that's one thing that I'm excited about. And then you factor in, Kendricks as an actual middle linebacker that understands the defense and can get the younger guys in position. I think that's going to help a lot because after LVE went out, Damone Clark was bad in just just diagnosing what's happening in front of him.
Yeah, and you mentioned Nealon. This is going to be a big. I know it's his rookie season. This is going to be a big deal for him because this is D-Law's last year on his contract.
Yep.
I'm assuming he's probably going to be gone next year. Potentially, he's aging. He's probably going to want a decent chunk of change to stay around. He might go be a mercenary somewhere else after this to get paid. Not sure
Yeah.
on
He's
a
probably
one
gonna
year,
be
2 year deal.
quarterback or Super Bowl hunting.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so. And so if Nealon can step up and be the next D Law, which all reports are saying that that's what he's supposed to be, then I'm
Yep.
excited to watch him play and see what he can do, especially if he's going to play opposite of D Law this season and really lock that down on the edges against the run. That would be nice to
Yep.
see.
Yeah, I kind of like how they have found a legitimate backup to D Law
Hmm.
instead of just rolling out whoever Fowler, Armstrong, Sam Williams, because Sam Williams fits more into the backup of Micah. Nealon fits more into the backup of Law. So that really works in my opinion. Now, actual nose tackle on this team, defensive, tackle worries me a lot because it's really Mozzie Smith or nothing. Which
Yeah.
I think that's kind of just hoping on a prayer kind of at this point.
Yep.
But we will see. Obviously, they got the where is he out of? I don't even know. Auburn, I think.
Oh, the seventh round pick. Yeah,
Yeah.
the big boy. It's true. That's true. That's actually a fair point. And he's actually supposed to be. I haven't watched any film on the guy. I don't know anything about him. But
No,
from
I
what I've
haven't
heard, he's
either.
supposed to be a pretty stocky boy. That's pretty stout against the run. So
Yeah.
just anchor, bro. That's all we need. Just anchor. You don't even got to get any penetration. Anchor, read and react, and let your linebackers flow. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, I think that's just the biggest position of worry for me on the defense. Other than that, I feel really good about the linebacker core, as long
Yeah.
as Kendricks doesn't get injured, and even, I mean, God forbid he does get injured, but I think that Overshown is just he shows more want and more like I feel like he knew where to be in those
Hmm.
preseason game. You could see that he was studying hard, and he wants to make an impact.
He
So I
made
don't.
that 3rd and 1 play. It's just a
Yeah.
monstrous play. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that he'll be good. He could play middle linebacker and really diagnose stuff, whereas Damone Clark isn't going to as much. Um, and then you also add in the linebacker out of Notre Dame, Liafu, and so and all remarks out of the rookie camps and all that stuff is he's looking good. So I'm excited about that. Really, just having guys that actually play linebacker, like you mentioned earlier, and not these safeties that are just called up. So
Yeah.
and then
When you look at linebackers throughout history that have been really great, even like the Ray Lewises and stuff, they always had really good defensive tackles in front of them, right? Every single one of
yeah,
them have always had them. So that's concerning because your linebackers are really only going to be as good as the guy in front of them allows them to be. Because if those offensive linemen are reaching the second level on a consistent basis, even if you try to side whatever it is, you can't really play at 100% ability if you've got guys on you. You can't flow and run to the ball at that point. So I
yeah,
guess we'll see what Mozzie does.
yeah. That's I think we'll probably see another in season trade for a defensive tackle depending
Hmm.
on where Mozzie's at. Because if Mozzie's not doing it, you have to make that move. And I think Zimmer's the type of guy that he's going to go to the front office and be like, "Listen, I want to play this kid. He's a first round pick, but I'm trying to do what's best for the team, what's best for me. Ultimately, I'm on a 1 year deal here too." Um, and he'll be like, "Yep, we need to make a move for a defensive
It
tackle."
was
And
Justin Rogers,
he,
by the way, was the
yes,
other DT.
Rogers, thank you.
Yeah.
Is he out of Auburn?
I just closed it out. I think that's what it said. Yeah.
Okay, well, either way. Yeah, and figuring out what you have in Mozzie is definitely important, but if it's not working out, cut your losses, go get somebody as early as you possibly can.
Hmm.
And even in training camp, like if you see this, yeah, obviously they have minimal pads and stuff on in training camp, but if you see that he's really not getting the push or doing what's expected of him, do not wait. If somebody comes available after cuts, you got to make your move and go get that guy, because it's that important. The defensive tackle position is that important for this team that has had the run game be an Achilles heel for them over and over and over for it seems like as long as I've been a Cowboys fan, really.
I think this season hinges on it, honestly.
Mm,
I mean, we've seen it before where teams just run on them, like Buffalo. We saw it in Green Bay. I know the big thing in Green Bay was guys were 20 yards open and they had a 20-yard radius in the
yeah.
secondary, right? But you look at the run game too; they got destroyed in the run game as well. So, that's been their vulnerability. I remember years ago too, the Rams beating them up. I mean, it's been an ongoing issue for a very long time. Even when they had good defensive tackles like Jay Ratliff and these guys, they still got beat up occasionally in the run, and it's always been kind of an Achilles heel of this team. I'd love to
Yeah.
see an investment. And to be fair, they made the investment in Mozzie Smith. Now they kind of ruined him by making him drop all that weight, his rookie season. But they made that first round investment in him. So let's hope it pays off, I guess. It's a lot of hopeful wishing
Yeah.
at this point, but that's all we can really do.
Well, I looked up a win percentage and yards allowed for Dan Quinn against the Shanahan tree. Not good. He gets
Yeah.
waxed against Shanahan tree. Adversely, though, Mike Zimmer is amongst one of the best DCs against the Shanahan tree. So that's
Interesting.
a good thing to see. I'll have to try to find that again and maybe send it to you. But it was early on in the season when I saw that. But it's one of those things, man. I think that they're seeing their fatal flaws a little bit now, more so than in years past, and they're realizing, okay, we need to make a concerted effort to get away from the stuff that has really hurt us and try to and I don't think that they want to do it with the big names or anything like that, but I
Hmm.
think they tried to aim at the draft, especially this year in doing that. And like you said, writing on the walls for probably for Jordan Lewis after this year. What they went and got Kalen Carson,
Yep.
who's
Big
probably a
time.
third rounder.
Yeah.
Um, and dropped to the fifth round. Marshawn Nealon, same thing for the D Law replacement. Um, you get Cooper Beebe in there. Is he
Hmm.
your center or is he a possible Zach Martin replacement? Who knows? We'll see.
But great
Um,
options though, either way,
but
right?
yeah, exactly. And then Tyler Guyton, obviously, you don't get the luxury of sitting in behind Tyron Smith one year, but obviously that's your plan right there. So they saw the error of their ways a little bit, and they realize maybe we need to stop paying these guys so much money all the time and try to get almost like moneyball it to a way
Hmm.
where it's like let these guys go that aren't pivotal pieces because what does every Super Bowl team almost have? A very good quarterback, a very good wide receiver one, and a stout defense. Though that's really the recipe. So I think that they're starting to see that a little bit more and realize maybe we shouldn't be paying our, okay, not okay, because D Law was not okay. He's very good in run defense.
Hmm.
He's okay in
He's just
pass
getting old.
rush, but he's just, yeah, exactly. So maybe we should stop paying these guys so much money and realize let's re up with a premium pick in the draft, second rounder, get somebody that can fill that role, let this guy walk, and then allocate that money to the more important positions. And so, maybe we will see a little bit more of the allocated cap hitting those really big positions like quarterback, wide receiver, and then the other money falls down and you and maybe we do see some trades for some pivotal pieces on the team in the past. They're willing to part ways with, and get draft assets back so they continue on with this process. But it's interesting.
I think there's a potential of trades and signing players, whatever that might be, for running back. I don't know if
That
necessarily
too.
the
Yeah.
second or third running back, some sort of combination there is necessarily on this team. I think Zeke and Dowdle both obviously will have a spot, but after that, I'm rooting for Deuce. I love Deuce a lot, but again, that's kind of a hopeful wishing type thing. He does offer
Yeah.
something that nobody else in the running back room offers, right? He's a shifty guy. He can go play in the slot, which I know they've been putting him there. He can catch balls out of the backfield. I just don't know if they're willing to develop him in that way and dedicate the time and energy to create plays specifically for him to
Well,
succeed.
I was at the bottom of the cellar as far as if I thought that Deuce was going to make this team, but then when the rule switch for the kickoff rule
Yeah,
switched around,
true.
his value went up to me because it's more like a run play than anything
Hmm.
because the teams are lined like this, so the blocking opens up and you know goes a certain way. So it's advantageous as a running back to have the vision in that department and be shifty and especially be small too. I mean that's helps. So Turpin and him, I feel like almost are guaranteed to make the team because you want to have two of those guys on the same field at
Exactly.
once.
Yep.
And so, interesting thing.
That is huge timing for Deuce. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was huge. Reading for Deuce too. EJ, hope you're doing better. Thank you. I'm doing a little bit better. My throat definitely feels better. Um, Still have some fatigue going on, but I'm working some hours, putting some hours in. No, but yeah, it's very interesting how it seemed like last year's draft was almost like trying to go super future, I guess. I don't know. It was so weird because you didn't really. I mean, I guess you needed a tight end, but bringing in a young guy
Hated that
because
pick.
you're young there already doesn't make sense to me. Kind of,
Yeah,
you know.
hated that.
Yeah, I hated that. That was the worst pick in that whole draft for
Like
me.
that's not
But
even hindsight. That's just straight up at the time. I was like, this is terrible. Absolutely hate this pick because I had a lot of faith in Ferguson at that point. So I just didn't understand that at
so
all.
did I. So did I. And even Hendershot at that point. Obviously, Hendershot didn't
Yeah.
look good last year, but um, who
I
was
mean,
the
they
fourth?
took Mozzie, they took Overshown, they took
Junior
Fahoko.
Fahoku. Yeah, Fahoku. That one was very. I liked the player. I just didn't see a fit on the team at that point, so it didn't
Hmm.
make sense to me. Um, the Mozzie pick, I had a second round grade on him. I just didn't see any pass rush upside. I don't care how athletic the dude is. If you're not getting sacks based on your athleticism in college, and I know Michigan doesn't run that scheme where they put their defensive tackles in that position. If you're not getting any, he had point 0.5 sacks over his entire career, I think, at Michigan.
Yeah.
That does not scream, oh, he's going to be effective there in the NFL to me. That's why I just didn't put him in that
Which is what
category, you
confuses me
know?
because that tells me they drafted him specifically to be a run stuffer, but then they made him lose like what 40 pounds. So I just don't
I
get it.
Yeah, I don't know. That whole draft was truthfully a head scratcher. Other than
Yeah.
Overshown, just didn't understand it. And I guess Deuce, I actually had a better grade on Deuce than where they took him. But
Jalen Brooks might end up being okay.
yeah, that we'll talk about him in a little bit. But Deuce, I think that you can't have Deuce be effective if you don't run block effectively,
Yeah.
and that was a big problem last year. But yeah, Jalen Brooks actually with the cut of Michael Gallup, we potentially could see Jalen Brooks be the wide receiver 3. Not
Hmm.
enough people are talking about that because he is a traditional X kind of a receiver. He's bigger bodied. He looks like he's gotten put on some pounds too.
He
He
does.
looks really good actually. Um, and he was decent in his limited snaps last year. So interested to see who really does win that wide receiver 3 position between him and Tolbert.
What's interesting is their UDFAs might even be better than any other draft picks that year, except for maybe Overshown. I really like him a lot, but they had Hunter Lipke, who I
Yep.
like a lot, TJ Bass, who is possibly the replacement for Zach Martin if BB works out at center, and
Yep.
then John Stevens Jr., who obviously tore his ACL last year, but was balling out at tight end before that. So
Yep. And you forgot the
interesting.
best one, the kicker.
Ah, yeah, yeah. No,
So yeah,
shame on me.
and actually, I'm kind of excited for this linebacker that we brought in from the UFL or XFL. Is it UFL now? I think it is.
UFL, yeah.
Um, yeah, that we brought in former NFL player, but he just didn't work out really in the NFL originally. Goes to the UFL. He looks like he's a different player now, from what I've heard. We've had a lot of success by taking these UFL players and implementing them into the roster. So I'm excited about him as well.
Front office gets a lot of hate and deservedly so for some of the stuff with the contracts and all that, but they don't get the credit they deserve for some of these other things like taking chances. I mean, their other teams sign these guys, but I feel like the Cowboys are consistently hitting on these guys, and now you're
Hmm.
seeing I mean, why not take a flyer on these guys that are top of the league in other leagues around the world who show promise? They're cheap. Why not give them a 1-year deal and see what they can do?
Yeah.
I think that's a good strategy. I was going to say this draft here, this last season, or this last 2024 draft, they got a lot of FU guys, right? Which this team was missing.
Yep.
A lot of guys with attitude, and I love that.
Yeah. I agree with that as well. Kyle says, "Do you expect Zimmer to blitz more with Dallas being pretty deep at corner? I'd like to see more run blitzing too." Uh, like I mentioned with Zimmer, so he does a very a fun thing where he walks both of his linebackers up. Sometimes he walks one of his linebackers up into the whole one. Sometimes doesn't walk any, but then he'll send them. He also isn't scared to run corner blitzes, which we haven't seen really under Dan Quinn. Jordan Lewis actually is a guy that's really good at corner blitzing. So I think that we might be seeing some more blitzing because I think that Dan Quinn almost trusted, instead of blitzing, he trusted stunts way more than any other DC in the league. And I like stunts, but I also, when you're putting them on film so much, the other team is ready for them. And it doesn't work as effectively early on or later on in the season that it did early in the season. That's why you see their sack numbers almost fall off a cliff every single season under Dan Quinn.
And it's easy
They're
to
really
scheme run
good.
plays against these consistent stunts as well.
Yeah, exactly. Once you realize what they're doing all times, oh, if Micah lines up in the middle, he's probably going off here for the stunt. And sometimes Micah just runs straight down the middle and just doesn't even care because it's an easy sack. Um, but oftentimes those stunts are actually at the detriment of the team, and especially to Micah Parsons because Micah can beat his guy one on one. All it's really doing is allowing guys to get sacks they shouldn't have, aka Dorrance Armstrong. He was a huge stunt merchant on just getting sacks because um, the other team knows, oh, we've got a double team Micah right here, and he just runs free and gets a free sack. So
Yeah.
less stunts, more blitzing. I think that's going to be a realistic possibility for this
Well,
team.
you want to
What do you
keep
think?
running these stunts. We're gonna run some outside zones here, and we're gonna shield you off on the corner. It's easy. It's easy
Yeah.
to do. So yeah, just I don't want to play a straight up, just beat your man style defense. I want more movement. It's almost like last year too. Dan Quinn got comfortable with just keeping Micah at the edge every single play, every single down. Whereas,
Hmm.
like you were saying, when Micah's in the middle, well, guards aren't equipped to handle him. He can beat guards one on one. He can beat centers one on one. He can run the stunts and all that, whatever. It's when you move him around the entirety of the defensive line as a chess piece, it's so much harder to scheme. And I'm hoping that he's also open to moving to linebacker as well, just to be the ultimate chess piece. I mean, he can even cover guys. I don't think I want him covering guys all the time, but we saw it his rookie year. He went and picked up a guy out on a out route or a
Saquon.
fly route,
Yeah.
and batted the ball down. It was a nice play. So you got to move the guy around. So yeah.
Anything else that you want to talk about, man?
Nah, man. I mean, the contract is the big thing, but we hit that pretty early. I mean, that's the thing everybody's talking about still. Until that gets done, that's going to be the topic on everybody's mind. So,
Yeah.
and until the first one goes, I think once the first one goes, I think the second one gets done quickly, whether that's Dak and CD in whatever order. Those are the two
Mhm.
that are going to go. It's just one's got to get done first, and I think the other one comes quickly after. I don't think either one goes into the season without a deal.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I'm leaning. It's gonna be within the first week of training camp, and I don't know how long they go. I think that they go like 10 days or something like that, or maybe even longer. Um, but I think it's like that 3 to 5 day range is gonna be the sweet spot for Dak. If he gets a deal, if he doesn't, I actually don't. I think they're just gonna let him play on this contract all the way through the season and re-go. I do think that CD gets done though, and expect him to be up there with right where Justin Jefferson is, in my opinion.
So you mentioned Trey Lance earlier and what they want to do with him, and he's interesting because I think if he plays well in the preseason, it gives you a couple of options. If you haven't already extended Dak, you can either use Trey Lance as trade bait. All right, you can possibly start him next year and get rid of Dak, and Dak's gone, and he's your starter. Maybe sign Trey because this is his last year on his deal too, so he needs a new contract. Maybe pay him 30 million, 32 million, whatever it might be a year. Or if he plays well, maybe you can try to regain some leverage with Dak at that point as well in contract negotiations. I don't think there's
Yeah.
a heck of a lot of leverage you can gain there. But the Cowboys have nothing right now leverage wise. So maybe that helps you get a little traction on their side. But an interesting tidbit on Trey Lance himself, we talked about the storyline stuff earlier, Nick Eatman. We had a call with him a couple weeks ago. He said in minicamp, Trey Lance was the third best quarterback behind Cooper Rush, that he didn't see anything from Trey Lance that Cooper Rush wasn't already doing or could do better throw wise, accuracy, arm strength, all that. So once we get into these padded practices, training camp, preseason games, I'm really interested to see what happens. I don't think Cooper Rush gets a lot of playing time in the preseason games. I think it'll be mostly Trey Lance. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting if Dak doesn't have a deal and Trey takes off.
That's very telling too, because I mean Trey Lance and Cooper Rush realistically have had just about the same amount of time in this offense. Uh, like give or take, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it is. That Trey Lance got traded here. So
Mm-hmm.
they've had about the same time in this offense. If Cooper Rush is looking like QB2 over Lance, that's not a good sign realistically, and especially with his tools. I mean, he should have a more live arm. He should have the more velocity on the ball that just Cooper Rush just doesn't have. And if Nick and I trust Nick's evaluation of players, he works for the team, so he's out there looking at these guys 24/7. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think that preseason is where his money's going to be made or lost. But yeah, I think that the likelihood of Trey Lance playing good in the preseason is 50-50. I think the likelihood of Trey Lance being better than Dak Prescott is 0.05.
Yeah, no doubt. The,
So,
the thing Trey's got going for him, though, over Cooper Rush has never had a good backup offensive line in the preseason to block for him. Not that it matters. He's been QB2, whatever. Trey Lance, he has a good backup offensive
mobility.
line. He's got the mobility,
Oh,
but he's
yeah,
also
okay.
got the offensive line to play for him too in this preseason. That's not just a bunch of garbage cans. It's actually some good players that'll block for him in these
Yeah,
games. Give him a chance to throw the ball.
that's a good point. Kyle says, I'm not too optimistic on Lance. Arguably the best offensive mind in the NFL today. Had no problem trading him after seeing him practice for 2 years. Yeah, I don't know that Kyle Shanahan is good at QB evaluation, truthfully. Um, I think that he just gets the best out of his players because of the offense more so than um, getting a court. Like he very much so likes cerebral quarterbacks that are good at pre-snap stuff, and that's the Jimmy G's and the Brock Purdy's more so than the Toosley guy. And that's one reason why he really liked Mac Jones in that draft. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he really was on Mac Jones. But they eventually took Trey Lance. So I don't know if it's an indictment on Lance or Shanahan more. I don't know. But I do know Mike McCarthy is kind of a QB guru in his own right, and can probably get the best out of Lance. Kyle has one more good point here. He says, keep a close eye on the running backs, obviously, after the cuts happen, and maybe get one of those guys, or, pull an in-season trade for one of those running backs. I think that the Cowboys saw how bad they were in the short running game and picking, especially in the red zone. I think that they were almost top 10 in the league in attempted runs in the red zone, and they were outside of the top 25 in success rate of runs inside
Mm.
the red zone. And so terrible in the respects of that, but they also think, okay, what was Zeke good at? Inside run, like just get me 3 yards kind of runs and red zone runs. So I think that they're trying to right their wrongs a little bit with the Zeke thing. Hopefully Rico Dowdle stays healthy. I think that I really do think that Zeke is going to be running back one, which a lot of fans don't want to hear. But I am completely open to going and finding a running back that gets cut from another team. I know that the Jets have a surplus of talent at the running back position. The Dolphins also. Um, I think the Broncos have some good players there as well. So there's a lot of running back talent out there. We've just got to be willing to pull the trigger and not let a name that has brought Jerry Jones some joy in the past, aka Zeke Elliott, deter him from going out there and signing
I
a
think
better player.
if this running back room stays the same as it is now, I think the key for this offense is going to be you're going to move the ball through the air, you're going to score on the ground because you got pounders. I mean, all these running backs are the same. Royce Freeman, Zeke, all these guys basically
Luke
do the same
Connor, yep.
thing. Yeah, even Rico to an extent. I think he's a little shiftier than some of the other guys, but he can bulldoze some people as well. Um, they're all the guys that are going to line up and get you 3 yards to carry, just bulldozing people as long as there's a lane to run through. They're not going to break away from anybody. So move the ball through the air, score on the ground. That's the
Yeah,
plan.
absolutely, man. Hey, short notice, I hit you up and you got on here. I super appreciate it. If you guys have not already followed Lord Dilly on Twitter, YouTube, um, are you on any other platforms?
During the season, I'll hop on like Instagram, TikTok. Right now, I'm just kind of on YouTube and Twitter. I'll be
Okay,
picking up my content here in the next probably couple of weeks. I've been on a hiatus. I don't really do much in the off season, but once the season starts rolling around, I pick up.
sweet. Well, pleasure having you on again, brother. Thank you for the late notice, showing up and talking some ball. If it's your first time on my channel or if you're on Twitter, go to my YouTube channel, leave a like on the video. I think it's in the link. And also subscribe, set the notification bell. And I do a new show every Tuesday, except for the past 2 weeks. I've kind of been sick and whatnot. But really going to continue to push out content, especially during training camp and whatnot. And probably have some exclusive footage from training camp as well. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, though, we'll catch you next week. Peace.